Hello, and here I am with a different video to what I would normally do. This is my competition entry into the Horror Fan Man YouTube channel's 1000 subscriber competition. He wanted us to do videos showing what our favourite horror films were from the 70s, 80s, the 90s, the 2000s and the 2010s. So without further ado, let us begin. So we begin with and I know most people can go, oh god, it's so obvious, it's blatant, but 1978, my favourite horror film of all time, the iconic John Carpenter's Halloween. It's just Jamie Lee Curtis on the back. I still would, but there you go. So if you don't know about this film, then you probably shouldn't be watching Horror Fan Man's channel, really, should you? It's one of the original slashers, and Michael Myers is a ledge, who, as far as I'm aware, in terms of the big guns of the horror movie franchises, is the only one who has never technically died. Obviously, Freddy died, and he came back as a dream murderer, and Jason died and came back as a zombie, and obviously Charles Lee Ray died and came back as Chucky, but Michael has never technically died. So there you go. You don't get any more hardcore than Michael Myers. Don't really need to say anything else about that film, do I? So we move on to the 80s, and 1980 to be precise, when we have Cannibal Holocaust. Again, another probably obvious choice. People are going, oh god, it's another blatantly obvious choice. There are some non-blatantly obvious choices coming up, I promise. So this is one of the original film movie nasties that got banned. Caused a lot of controversy, obviously, because some people believed that the deaths in this film were true, and the director was actually arrested at one point because they thought he'd made a snuff movie. It also is the precursor to the sort of found footage, lost documentary style that would become popularised by the Blair Witch Project, which is also known as the movie that just gave me a headache every time I tried to watch it. Again, don't really need to say a lot about this film. If you haven't seen it, what are you doing? Now we come to my first not so obvious choice as we go to 1992, and it's Brain Slasher. Now, this in America was called Mind Warp, and it stars the legendary, awesome Mr. Bruce Campbell, who I am a massive fan of. But as well as that, it also has Angus Scrimm, best known as the Tall Man, of course, in the Phantasm movies. Now, the interesting thing about this film is it was 1992, which I believe was at least 6 years before The Matrix came out, and yet, in this film, at the beginning, we see somebody plug in a sort of wasteland real world, plugging themselves into a machine to go into a dream-like ideal world. And this was 6 years before the Wachowskis brought out The Matrix. Or it might have been 5 years, I'm not sure, but I think it's 6. So yeah, Wachowskis obviously were big fans of Brain Slasher and ripped it off. In this movie, of course, Bruce Campbell plays one of the sort of like last, he's Stover, basically. He's one of the last humans living in the outdoor world outside this like dream, this sort of like dome where most people are living. And this woman gets evicted from the dome. I think it's called Eden, although it's been a while since I've seen this film. I really should have done my research before making this video. But she comes across Stover, and then she meets her dad, played by Angus Scrimm, who's this mentalist who's in charge of all the mutants, because everyone who lives out in the wasteland is a mutant except for Bruce Campbell. And if you want to know any more about the story, go and check it out. Angus Scrimm, Bruce Campbell, what more recommendation could you possibly need? So we go into the 2000s, and we have it's Hellraiser Hellworld. And a lot of people are probably going to be thinking, what are you doing picking Hellraiser Hellworld? Well, the Hellraiser franchise is pretty much... Is it dead? It probably is pretty much dead now, isn't it? Let's be honest. There's not really much life left to Pinhead and his Cenobites. But the first two films I really liked. Then they kind of died off. They kind of lost their way. And they were really messy and just convoluted. But then this came along. I think this is the 7th movie in the franchise. It stars Lance Henriksen as this kind of like evil dude who's got this like computer. He's got like this cyber party, and he invites people along to this cyber party. What he's trying to do is sacrifice people to Pinhead. So it kind of brings Pinhead into the digital age, involving the internet and things like that. And I don't know why. It's probably not a very good film, but for some reason, I just really like it, and it's probably one of my favourite Hellraiser films outside of the original Hellraiser. So yeah, I'm not going to try and defend myself anymore because people are probably going to be slagging me off and slating me and, just what are you doing? But yeah, Hellraiser Hellworld, I love it. It comes to our last film, which is going to be a contentious entry. It's Seawolf, as it's known in the UK, or Subconscious, as it was supposed to be called, and it is actually called in America and in every country except for the UK, I think, because for some reason the UK distributors didn't think we would understand the film being called Subconscious. I don't know. So what's it about? It's a sort of horror. I'm going to call it a horror film. It's a horror film based on a submarine. You may never have heard of it. The reason why I have picked it is because I have a friend by the name of Mike Beckenham who just in the last few months won the Best Actor award at the UK Horror Convention Movie Awards. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but he won for his performance in Redwood, which is a film that I don't think has hit cinemas in the UK yet. If it has, it was a very limited release, but it also stars Nicholas, whatever his face is, from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But anyway, I know Mike. I used to work with Mike, and this was his debut film. As you can see, he's signed it for me, just in case he becomes not just in case, when he becomes a big star. Hopefully, it'll be worth a few pennies. Not that I would ever sell it because it's personalised to me, but this was his first role in which he plays a character along with his team who ends up on this submarine, which is being haunted by like the former captain of it, and ends up going back in time, and they end up in the middle of a war. Doesn't sound very horror-ish, but I don't really own a lot of modern horror films because I don't really like a lot of modern horror films. So I went with this one, Sue Me. So that was my top 5 films from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s and 2010 onwards. And thank you very much.